Okay, Mr. Prager, we have our German website management, denker.de, and we are looking for interviews to show it to German managers and our people that look to our website. In your book, The Future of Competition, you write values have to be co-created with the consumer. What does that mean?
I think if you look at the traditional view of value, the assumption was the firm will create value and exchange it with the consumer. The role of the consumer was quite passive. But if you look at what has happened because of the internet, because of social communities and social networks, and convergence of technologies, the role of the consumer has changed dramatically. So whether it's video games, Lego Mindstorm, Apple, Google, suddenly you find that the consumers are not passive. They're part of creating their own experience. To give you an idea, if you take Apple iPod, the company only provides the device. You decide what playlist, what news, what information you want to have. You're part of creating your own experience. So today what I think is the general trend is that consumers and companies together will create value, not alone. And the examples are everywhere, whether it's Starbucks or Netflix or Norwich Union for insurance in the UK. It's all over the place.
The German economy is based on export, and does the German industrial exporters hold their relative competitive position? Do you think so?
I think whenever you have something unique to offer, you will hold your competitive position. It's not just only about cost structure, but it's about unique value. So if you look at Germany, the family-owned companies which have had unique niche markets, what I think in Germany you call them hidden champions, have demonstrated that there is a big opportunity here. And for the first time, exports can increase dramatically because the emerging markets are growing at an unprecedented rate, whether it's China, India, Brazil, Africa, and so on. So for the first time, you don't have to depend only on the mature markets of Europe, Japan, and the United States. We have a whole growth opportunity because 4 to 5 billion people are looking for good quality life. And this is the biggest growth opportunity the world has ever seen.
That brings me up to the next question. You talk about the bottom of the pyramid in the globalization process. What does that mean? Which potential do you see?
I think if you think about cell phones, for the first time in human history, 4 billion people are connected. Out of the 4 billion, 3 billion are poor people who normally we would not have thought of as consumers. So for the first time, we are able to think of the poor people living on less than $2 a day as potential consumers. And people can say, is there a real market here? But if you look at the cell phone, there is a real market. They're willing to pay for it. And the companies which participate here, whether it's Nokia, Ellen Ericsson, are extremely profitable. But more importantly, the carriers, whether it's Safaricom, whether it's Celtel, if it's MTN, Vodafone in India, or Telenor in India and Bangladesh, or Indian companies like Airtel, they're all extremely profitable. So my first thesis is there is a market at the bottom of the pyramid, less than $2 a day. If you find the appropriate business models, it is extremely profitable. And the third, poor people will accept technology more rapidly than any of us could have predicted. And the last, which is starting to happen, is these markets provide tremendous opportunity for innovation, like remittances using cell phone or financial transactions using cell phone, which we still can't do in many parts of Europe.
Even for example, Mohammed Yunus, he founded the Grameen Bank, and they have in these villages in Bangladesh those telephone ladies that own a mobile phone. How much do those kind of wonderful ideas like Mohammed Yunus had with his microcredits have influence to the globalization process? Is this?
I think Mohammed Yunus's microfinance is now a worldwide phenomenon. It's not anymore just in Bangladesh. It's well and alive in India, in Africa, in Mexico, and Brazil. So that has happened all across. So it's not new any longer. But what is interesting is the same kind of organization of the workforce in poor communities, in villages and small towns, is going to create enormous opportunities for people in advanced technology industries. Just like a phone lady who provides the telephone service to the local community, and she's a local entrepreneur who makes money. The next step for her is to buy a fax machine or a copier fax combination, and very soon a PC.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly you have a village PC that allows her to rent it on an hourly basis, just like cell phones, and become an entrepreneur. But what is interesting is, for one PC and one cell connection to your PC, you may have 25 people who are able to participate in being connected and also search the web. So it's quite a big revolution.
So my last question, do we need new tools for management, and which one do you propose?
I think we need new approaches to management because the new emerging markets force a very different pace and rhythm of management. It requires frugal engineering. When I say frugal engineering, how do you build a $2,000 car? Is not about making the car so bad in quality that it's schlock product and it's not a sloppy engineering. It's a very different way of thinking about engineering. So I believe that what we are going to get is frugal engineering, a different approach to design, different approach to business models. For example, in the example that you used about phone ladies in Bangladesh, it is a different business model to allow ordinary people to participate in connectivity. Or a kiosk-based desktop is a different business model. So we are going to find new tools and lots of innovation. What I think is important for people to understand is the poor around the world as a market will force dramatic improvements and innovations in cost, in quality, and delivery.
Professor Pralat, I thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you.